Okay, we're good to go.
Okay, call our work session to order. First item on the agenda tonight is going to be the approval of the minutes from our November 17th meeting. Were there any questions or changes there? Mr. Malin Smith.
Thank you, Rob. It may be a minor point, but I want to raise it because I want the information to be accurate for both the Board of Aldermen and ARB. But it's on page 4, under point number 2, concerning the preliminary site development plan. About halfway down the page, it references me and indicates that I move to add condition R, which is accurate, but it's the elevations of the building are reversed. I was advocating that the Ballas Road side be made similar to the Clayton Road side, and it's just the reverse in the text.
Okay.
Correct.
And again, we withdrew the motion, Rob, and I understand exactly why, but it's a point that I think we agreed should be at least addressed by ARB. And I would want this record to reflect accurately which elevation is to mimic which elevation.
Okay. I'll let you make a motion to amend that when the time comes.
Okay.
Unless we think that's small enough that it's a Scrivener's error, but that one seems a little bit bigger.
Yeah, I'd rather amend that.
We'll get that one moved. Okay, great. Anything else on the minutes from November 17th? Okay, great. First item under new business this month will be the conditional use permit on Post Oak Road for the outdoor game court. Any questions of staff on that?
Do we have a MSD input there? Sorry.
MSD, Mr. White?
Yeah.
They have permits through DNR because of the amount of grading they're doing. And they're also going to do some ponds later. So they actually have a permit through the Corps of Engineers, Army Corps of Engineers. So they've tripped a lot of larger agencies for view of the site.
Do we need that on the record when we discuss it?
It's up to you. But when they've got a site improvement plan in our office that has been reviewed by DNR, and their engineer can talk you through that process, where they're at with that. I don't know where they're at with the Corps of Engineers. That's like a phase 2 aspect.
But what's in front of us tonight is just the conditional use permit for the game court. So all the rest of this with the site improvement plans will come later. I see.
Oh,
The only
that'll come later
reason-
anyway.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, the only reason they're here is because of the permanent sport court
Okay.
aspect.
Got it. We'll see the rest of that later, it sounds like.
I did send a late email that I got like at 5 o'clock. If everyone, I don't know if everyone had a chance to check their emails. So we've gotten a letter of support from a southern neighbor, Craig Gooch. And then this last one that came in at 5 o'clock was from the adjacent neighbor on the south side as well. So I forwarded that email to all of you. So they've gotten 2 emails of confirmation that the neighbors are okay with it.
Okay. Anything else? Mr. Malin Smith, did you have questions on this one?
Just a clarification, Rob. Coincidentally, since the second subject on the agenda tonight is to discuss tree issues, I just want to be sure that the ordinance, as I understand it, does not apply to this project, and it applies to either commercial entities or subdivision creation, correct?
Yes, sir. The ordinance is triggered by if you're doing a subdivision, doing commercial, if you're doing an infill house, a tear down, or if you're increasing impervious area on your lot by more than 50%. In this case, I calculated it, it's 28.37%. So none of the factors that trigger a tree study and then preservation of at a minimum of 50% of your volume applies in this instance.
Good. Yeah, I raised the issue just because the second photograph that was provided seems to indicate that a number of rather mature trees could be removed in order to accommodate this project.
Yes, it would appear that way. I did ask them to put in landscaping, this significant amount, and they put in 16. They're showing 16 overstory trees on the southern side of the sport court. These are not, small ornamental types. These are going to be large overstory trees to help repopulate that canopy to an extent.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Bolzina?
Yes, the two letters that we received, are they people on Post Oak? And is there any letters from the neighbor immediately to the north?
Looking at the letters they're all from neighbors to the south, not the north.
Okay.
That's another subdivision. I'm not sure if they've reached out and haven't heard back. That would be a good question for them, but the two we have are from the south.
It's a little difficult to tell from the submission drawings to what extent trees will be preserved, to the extent that they exist. They appear to exist on the photograph, but it's not apparent from the submission the extent of the trees that would be preserved on the north side of the play court.
There, based on the aerial, there will be tree preservation. They are putting I don't know the extent, like you said, but they're putting a walking trail around the property that I would assume, but this again is a good question for the applicant, is going to weave through the remaining trees that are part of that canopy.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, there will be some more disturbance besides the play court for the walking trail, to the extent that there's any buffer for our neighbor to the north.
Mr. Mellon Smith.
Thank you. Mr. Bolzina raises a good point. And in addition to the walking court, if I understood the diagram materials correctly, there's also going to be a drive added to the sport court. Is that correct?
They show a drive connecting to the sport court, correct? A 12-foot wide drive, yes.
So it's a significant disturbance. So I think the question should be directed to the applicant.
Yes. Yeah, it does. I reviewed it carefully. It doesn't rise to the level to trigger a tree stand delineation. Even if it did, they'd have to just preserve 50%. They're putting significant trees back, but the decision making as to the size of the court and the driveway width are all good questions for the applicant.
Further questions of staff?
Just one last one, if I may. Did they indicate what the 12-foot drive was really for?
I am unsure as to the purpose.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, they have a letter that they submitted with their packet. Let me I don't know if you need a 12-foot wide driveway for power wheels. Bikes.
Those are some big power wheels.
Yeah, so I know my kids don't, but that's again a good question for the applicant.
Well, and new guy question. I mean, do we really? I mean, are they not asking? They're what authority do we have over something like that?
Well, you always fall back on, this is a conditional use, and conditional uses, there are 8 standards for
Yep.
approval.
Yep.
Substantially increased traffic hazards or congestion, fire, health, safety, affect visual coherence, development character of adjacent neighborhoods, general welfare, overtax public utilities, operate in a manner that's physically or visually incompatible with permitted uses in surrounding areas, substantially increase stormwater drainage on other lots. In this case, they're doing a big system, or create a nuisance. Those are the 8 standards that you have to answer those questions before approving a CUP.
Okay, so one follow-up question, if I may. We have no topography, right? We don't have any of that in the deck here.
Page
Yes.
5. It should be 15 of the electronic packet.
Okay,
Yeah, there's significant topography on the site, which I think may have played a role in where the court was located,
yeah, okay.
as it falls to the south. I think they're also using that topography to help create the ponds that they're going to install.
Additional questions of staff on item 1? Ryan, who's our presenter tonight on that item? Do you know?
Matt Poston of THC Design should be on the call, who developed the plans, and then the nays, I believe is Tim and Mary Nay, N-E-Y, maybe on the call as well.
Okay. Next item tonight will be item 2, the zoning text amendment for the natural resource protection standards. Any questions to staff on item 2? Mr. Bolzina?
Yeah, I had some previous discussions with Ryan on the wording a little bit, and I don't know if the text has been changed, but there was just a structural kind of question about the ordinance is supposed to apply to woodlands, and then further down in the amended sections, we make reference to clusters of trees and then grand trees. So there was some confusion in my mind at the time. Why are we referring to clusters of trees and grand trees if this particular ordinance really has to do with the regulation of woodlands? So, I mean, Ryan, you can, I guess, respond to that, but
Certainly, the tree cluster or clusters of trees refers to areas of woody plant material under 5,000 square feet in area. Woodlands are over 5,000 square feet in area. And woodlands are obviously what we apply our preservation requirements to. So a cluster of trees is not quite a woodland, if you will, but it still needs to be shown on a tree stand delineation so we have a true understanding of what's existing on the property and how our regulations would apply.
so my confusion and question still, I believe, for staff and for our commissioners is if we're requiring a homeowner or applicant to research and depict things that are not really pertinent to the regulation, is that overreaching of those requirements that we're putting on the resident to say, you know, you've got to show these, even though we're not going to consider them in this application because we're only looking at woodlands, but we want you to show the grand trees and we want you to show tree clusters. So which could be an added expense, could be a insignificant expense, but it seems to be inappropriate to the requirements of this particular ordinance.
Good, Ryan.
Well, first of all, it'd be the subdivider, the developer that would be doing this study. It wouldn't necessarily be an infill home type situation, or a homeowner, individual property owner. And I wouldn't look at it as clusters and woodlands. I would look at it as trees 6 inches in caliper or over. The city wants to know where every single tree 6 inches in caliper or over is located on that property. And then based on how they're grouped, whether it constitutes a woodland or a tree cluster. But it's really about the size, the caliper size. 6 inches is really where we start to differentiate and understand these are trees of note that we want to know where they're placed, how they're going to be impacted, and whether they constitute a woodland or a cluster. And that would be part of any basic tree study, tree stand delineation that a certified arborist or landscape architecture firm could produce.
Mr. McKnight?
I guess I just want to make sure I understand this, Ryan. So what I'm reading this change to be is what we discussed in the last meeting, which was we are just changing the requirement to take it away from them having to hire an arborist themselves to the city hiring an arborist and them paying the city for it. Is that correct? So we're not rewriting this. We're not rewriting anything about this that's currently written, save for the fact that the city selects the arborist and they pay for it. Is that correct?
No.
No.
And it's not correct, because I wanted to bring a word change to you, because after rereading this draft, which I'm responsible for, I want to change the word, the city of Town and Country shall select the certified arborist or landscape architect to the city of Town and Country shall approve the certified arborist or landscape architect. I don't want the city to be in the business of selecting the arborist and then having getting us between the developer and the arborist. I'd rather the developer negotiate and find an arborist and a price that they're willing to pay, but then the city, with this language, shall have responsibility and oversight of their work, now has a more prominent role in the development of the plan. You know, we're boots on the ground. We're at the scene looking at the trees. We're more involved in communication with the arborist about how the plan is developed and the decisions that are being made. Where right now that's really not the case.
Okay, I get that. But I guess the question I was asking, kind of coming back to Dennis's question, was we're not changing when a developer needs to bring in an arborist. We're not changing the requirements for when an arborist should be there and what reports they should generate. We're just get some oversight in the city to being able to select the arborist, or being able to have some decision on what the arborist, not decide, but approve the arborist that's been selected. So I guess
yes,
I'm looking, and Dennis, I'm coming back to your point, to the commissioners. I don't know that I'm looking to rewrite this zoning code as part of this process, save for making sure that the arborist that's being used is acceptable to us. If we want to go rewrite this code, let's do it. Let's choose it and do it. But if you have a problem with the code and how it's written as far as woodlands and those types of things, that's a bigger picture. That's bigger picture, I think, than what Ryan's proposing here.
No, I think it was a logical, it was a more of a logical question of what is needed by the arborist and by the applicant to satisfy this code requirement. And the code requirement is regulating woodlands. It's not regulating grand trees, and it's not regulating tree clusters. But nonetheless, we're going to require the applicant to delineate those, even though they're not important for the approval.
I'm just saying, my point is it already requires that.
Well, I don't care. I mean, we're suggesting changes, so why don't we suggest changes that are appropriate? So
Okay. Mr. White, before we go, so remember the purpose of our session here is to make sure we have the information to have
Sure.
the actual discussion at
Yeah.
7. So if this is about providing you the information, you would need to be able to have that discussion at 7.
Okay.
Please ask it, otherwise we'll discuss it.
Yeah, my point I can ask in session. That's
Great,
fine.
thank you. Any other questions to staff on item 2?
Well, I just want to go back.
Go ahead, Dennis.
Ryan, you said that the city didn't want to be in the business of selecting the arborist. Is that correct?
Correct.
But
That
select
was-
is still in the wording.
And I'm requesting that we amend it to say approve.
Okay,
Select.
okay. All right,
Okay.
thank you.
And Steve, if you want to jump in, I just don't want us to cross a line, you know, where we're basically mandating to a private entity, you have to use these people and they're going to charge you this much for
Yeah,
this.
I agree.
Right. Ryan and I talked about this today or yesterday. I'm losing my mind. I don't know if it was today or yesterday, and I made that suggestion. I don't like the idea of dictating entirely who they use. I think there are, you start getting into, Town and Country has lots of regulations. I don't think they are unreasonable, but I think sometimes you can have regulations that border on unreasonability, giving rise to somebody coming back and saying, you're taking my property without due process because you're writing the rules and you're telling me who I got to hire to comply with the rules, and it's your arborist, it's not ours. And I think there are secondary problems with it being essentially or arguably our arborist. I think it's better that it's their arborist, but we approve them. And to make this appear to be less unreasonable, or to not be unreasonable. I think when you tell them who they have to hire, which really is the main purpose of this rule, I don't know. I think that that there's an argument that you're stacking the deck by doing that.
The problem is that we went along this path because we wanted the arborist to be an agent of the city and not an agent of the applicant. And that arose because we have difficulties arguing with the applicant's arborist because we don't have expert knowledge on our side. So like it or not, I think we should still make the arborist an agent of the city and not of the applicant.
Why don't we get into that in the session? That sounds
Yeah.
like the meat of the issue.
And that's
right
why I
there.
said I was willing to, but it was raised after I agreed to go into session, that I just wanted to raise it anyway.
Dennis, did you have another item?
No, I mean, it's part of the ongoing discussion about
Right.
picking the arborist. Yeah.
Got it.
Mhm.
All right, Alderman Whitmire, will you have a report for us from the Board of Aldermen?
Oh, absolutely. And it will be exciting.
Perfect.
And
expect nothing
extensive.
less.
It won't be extensive. It'll be exciting.
If we do, I note that if we do move the zoning text amendment onto the board tonight, we will have some findings. So we'll go to our resident finder, Dr. O'Mell, for that when the time is right.
They're almost memorized.
Mr. McKnight? Oh, you're muted.
Just a quick question for Ryan. Ryan, is the text that is in the printed packet the same as the most up-to-date one? Or is there an update to the text in the?
What you have is the most up to date. So,
Okay.
yeah, like I
Now
said, I would request that.
Yeah, and listening to this, I'm confused. So we'll talk about it in the meeting, but
Okay.
Okay. Anything else? All right, we will we'll adjourn and we'll see you in 4 minutes on the other Zoom. Good. Thanks, everybody.